Greetings, students. My name is Dr. Tymon Graham. I work at Kentucky State University and serve as Chief of Staff. Every day, my responsibilities is to work with our president, our campus, to make sure that the students here at Kentucky State University are successful. My favorite subject in school was English. I enjoyed every day of English class. The book that I'll be reading is The Hatseller and the Monkeys by Baba Wagu Kadisi. But Musa was a hat seller. He was a joyful man. He traveled from town to town selling hats, which he piled high on his head. He manun ning koi korisa, he sang, which means what a wonderful business hat selling is. Ever since he was a little boy, Musa made and sold hats. His grandparents and his own parents were hat makers, and they taught him to do this at a very young age. After each harvest, the whole family would venture out to the fields to collect rice stalks, from which they made wide-brim debiri hats, and they sold the hats. During the rainy season, they embroidered close-fitting fooligan caps with intricate patterns of brightly colored threads. Through his joyful spirit and hard work, Musa had become very well known in the neighboring towns. Wherever he arrived, with his hats piled high on his head, the children would follow him and sing along as he sang his favorite song, He manun nun ning korisa, He manun ning koi korisa, He manun ning korisa. This is the story of how Musa learned an important secret for success. One day, Musa heard that a great festival was to take place in a neighboring town. There, he could sell more hats than he had ever sold before. He spent many days making hats for this event. To get to the festival by evening, he began his journey in the early morning. But he was in such a hurry, he did not eat breakfast. Halfway to town, Musa grew tired and hungry. He had to stop and rest under a shady mango tree. He unloaded the hats from the top of his head and put them on the ground next to him. Then he covered his face with a blind shade to keep the sun from his eyes. Musa soon fell asleep and began snoring loudly. Little did Musa know that the fruit from the tree attracted monkeys. Musa's snoring alerted them to this company. As usual, monkeys are very curious and smart. They crept down from the tree, yoli, 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 quietly, 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 and sneaked around Musa. Being attracted to the colorful hats, each monkey selected one. They climbed back up to the tree and imitated Musa, covering their faces and snoring. Kreet, kreet. Soon, Musa awoke from his sleep, rested but hungry. Eager to continue his journey, he looked for his hats. But where were they? They had been stolen. Frantically, Musa called for help. He manun, he cried out. When the monkeys heard this, they answered him, Hoo, 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 hoo. But Musa looked up and realized what had happened. But he was so hungry, he could not think clearly on what to do. He raised his arm in the air, cha-cha, cha-cha. He yelled. The monkeys stared down at him and replied, hoo, hoo, shaking their arms wildly. But Musa threw a dead branch at them, hoping to scare them off. But the monkeys merely threw leaves at him in return. Then Musa picked up a stone and threw it up in the tree. The monkeys picked up mangoes and threw them down at him. By this time, Bamusa was faint with hunger, and so he collected the fruit and sat down to eat. He ate until his stomach was full. Now Bamusa could think clearly. Now he knew what he must do. He removed the only hat he had left from his head and shook it up in the air at the monkeys, shouting, "He, Manu, he, Manu." All the monkeys did the same thing, grabbing the hats off their head and howling, "Hoo, hoo, 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 hoo." Bamusa dropped his hat, tot, to the ground, and all the monkeys dropped their hats, tot, 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 tot. Without losing a second, Bamusa collected all of his hats. He stacked them back on top of his head and rushed to his destination. He arrived not a moment too soon. So great was Bamusa's happiness from his recent luck that his spirit of goodwill helped sell all of his hats. And so it was that Bamusa learned from the monkeys that it is with a full stomach that one thinks best, for an empty satchel cannot stand. I encourage you all to read this book and read other books. Thank you for reading with me.